We have a little over 100 people right now coming in, so I think it's a good time to get things rocking and rolling. And as more people coming in, as I kind of talk about this beginning portion here, we'll be set to go. So if you are just coming in, you haven't heard my spiel before, my name is Ryan Cashman. I'm here with Education and Learning Services with VRMA. And I'm very excited and happy of our really well participated webinar this afternoon. It's treated a little bit like a town hall. I know we were collecting questions from 10 audience members, and so we're here to discuss some of those questions and really kind of begin to, as a larger group, larger body of people, discuss some of the things that are happening in today's climate. And to help us and guide us through those types of waters today, we have the owner of HR for VR, Sue Jones, as well as the executive director of the Vacation Rental Housekeeping Professionals, Dirk Johnson. My goal here is to help out in terms of moderating some of the questions that had come through either the education email or through our survey. In hopes to shed light on where we can, but I want to really focus this webinar on just the conversation of where it goes, and especially when it comes to staffing needs, as well as and staffing questions, as well as housekeeping as well. So a couple of house rules here. I'm going to be recording this webinar locally here, so that we'll be able to bring it up onto our COVID-19 VRMA resource page, which will be made available by close of business day today. I encourage you all to go to that resource page where we are evolving a lot of the different resources that might be helpful for you as you are navigating what to do next during this the pandemic. Additionally, part of those resources will be a pre-recorded webinar, as well as another pre-recorded webinar, which will be up by the end of the week by Sue Jones and Dirk Johnson, talking about some of the HR and staffing information that you'll get a taste of on this webinar that'll go into far more deeper detail on those pre-recorded webinars. So please keep a lookout for those links, making sure that you are driving to that page to help you with whatever you need. If you have any questions that come up throughout the webinar, please go ahead and use the Q&A box located on the bottom portion of your Zoom screen. Like I said, I have collected a lot of questions, and we're going to be talking about those questions. So if something gets answered or something else pops in your head, please go ahead and use that Q&A box there. My first, what I want to do first is sort of have Sue Jones introduce herself, Dirk Johnson introduce himself, then it'll be rounded back to me. And I'll go ahead and start with our very first question that we were getting a lot of different versions of, and we'll start from there. So Sue, pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. I'm really excited to be here today and participate. I have been involved in the vacation rental industry for over 8 years now, and specifically focused in human resources. I'm the owner of HR for VR, and I look forward to being able to provide some insight today and moving forward.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to attend. I'm so glad that we get to participate in social distancing and not social isolation. It's so good to be in a virtual room with all of you. If only I could see all of your faces. That would be so cool. Anyway, excited to talk about the back of the house needs and help provide some direction and some instruction to you, so you can walk through this labyrinth of items that we have to address as we start to work through COVID 2019.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you. Obviously, your guidance is very much appreciated. I know a lot of the questions that we're going to be focusing on are things like housekeeping needs, back to the house needs, as well as HR and staffing and workforce needs. So I know there have been some questions in terms of cancellations, but what we want to focus on is how those cancellations are affecting some of those other parts of the business. So I want to focus on something that has been on a lot of people's minds, is the idea of normalcy and how we're trying to navigate and define what that is. But in terms of staffing, one of the questions that I got a lot was, how are companies handling staffing in light of an unknown timeline to normalcy? And to add on to that, if they are facing with something like a employee workforce reduction, what are some considerations? What are some things that people are talking about right now? And so I want to kind of start the ball rolling with you.
Well, that's a great question. I wish I had all the answers. So, unfortunately, I'm along with everyone else. You're navigating through this, and I think that's where certainly I can provide some insight. Let's really start with staffing first from the standpoint of being a business owner during this time. The important piece is making sure we're providing a safe workplace for our employees. And under OSHA, COVID-19 is actually considered a hazard. And so we are, as employers, required to make sure we're providing that safe workforce. The first thing that I'm seeing clients do and people in the industry right now are putting out a temporary remote work policy. And for two reasons. The first reason is we really want to get into that social distancing. And as much as I travel and as much as I visit all of your lovely offices, I love how you're all grouped together in these back rooms and small rooms. And today it just isn't going to be safe to have 4 reservations huddled in a 8x10 room or to have guest services all at the front desk. So we want to have a remote workplace policy that promotes social distancing, but also that it provides an opportunity for employees to work remotely and work a little bit more in isolation and continue to keep safe. So when you think about that and think about temporary remote policies, the key here is to develop a policy that is definitely titled COVID 2019 or temporary. Let people know it's a short-term duration, but be really clear about who is eligible, because not all positions are going to be eligible within the workplace. Obviously, there are some positions that are not truly eligible to be working in a remote situation. The most important thing is to really go through and look at all of the different work that's being done in your business and look at how that work can be done remotely, regardless of the position. So if you start to think of skill sets and who can be doing this work. And the other piece for having this remote workplace policy is as this virus continues to spread, you probably will have more of an impetus of employees who are either going to be quarantined or asked to take a self-quarantine because they've come in contact with some individuals.
So you had mentioned a little bit about the remote work and how you transition some of the workforce into that world. There are some people that are doing some seasonal hiring. So for example, like May through June, or something like that. And when it comes to those maybe short stint hiring processes, or is it how would you recommend someone kind of approaching those types of hiring needs if that's something that they can do?
Well, one thing I'd like to suggest is maybe we go back and start at the bigger picture and think about what does your workforce staffing look like now and what does it need to look like in light of this virus and situation. Most people are considering and talking about what will happen if the reservations continue to decline, if the cancellations continue to increase, how am I going to support the workforce I currently have? So when you think about supporting the workforce that you currently have, what you want to be able to do is think about if you have to go into any kind of workforce reductions, that you're looking at all kinds of opportunities to assist with continuing to pay your employees. And from that perspective, if you're looking at a reduction, unemployment benefits are available, and most states they're available immediately. And so if you wanted to do a temporary reduction in force, you can work through unemployment in a number of manners, either to partially help with some of the hours, or if you need to lay somebody off temporarily. And the key I would encourage everybody to think about is if you are going to have a temporary workforce reduction, be sure you communicate it as temporary. And I would think about keeping it within a 30-day time frame so that people can continue their benefits. There is this opportunity that they're going to come back. The shorter period of time that you have this policy for gives you a little bit longer to figure out what those key needs are. In addition to unemployment, when you look at the unemployment rates, each state has a different rate, and it ranges anywhere from $235 a week in Alabama to over $790 in Washington state. So unemployment may or may not be a huge benefit to your employees. A greater benefit may be keeping them employed at a reduced pay rate for a temporary period of time. So I'm really encouraging everyone to think about their staffing, to think about what is the work that needs to be done. How can you utilize your current workforce? So to answer your question about the seasonal side, Ryan, I think that if there is a need for seasonal hiring, making sure that you are absolutely utilizing all of the current individuals you have available in your workforce today. The other piece is whether you're hiring for seasonal workers or not, I do think part of your workforce planning, you need to plan for a certain percentage of your employees to be quarantined, either self-quarantined or due to coming in contact with someone. So there is going to be a shortage of the workforce.
Yeah, and I would also add to that, we should always be looking at our forecast on the back of the house side to forecast how many housekeepers or how many maintenance techs or laundry staff we need. And that can be updated, frequently based on the reservation pattern that's taking place, whether it's on the upswing or whether it's on the downswing, depending upon where you're at. And then to build on Sue's comment, looking at your tasks that need to be done and trying to break, or the whole job that needs to be done, and break it into smaller tasks. So if you do have to have a remote workforce, you can look at your jobs in a different way to facilitate that.
Yeah. There are very significant things you need to take into account when you're considering workforce changes, and from a legal perspective, from your employer perspective, as well as what employee rights are. And one of the key things around all of this that is very important is to remember the personal health information side and the confidentiality that's required by employers as you're talking to individuals who may need an accommodation to work remotely because they've come in contact with the virus, or maybe they have somebody in their home who has. All of that information is very personal and it's confidential. So in your communications to other employees, you need to speak to it without using people's names.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one other piece with the unemployment, I know how diligent this industry is about fighting unemployment claims. And just so everyone is aware, any unemployment that is classified related to COVID 2019 will not ding your employer rates. Your rates will not go up because of these costs that you're actually incurring during this short period of time.
That's huge. Because I know a lot of us are worried about that, because that's going to increase my overall cost.
Yes.
So yeah,
yes.
That's huge.
Yeah.
A nice gift, so to speak.
So yeah, kind of related to that, I think when we're talking about temporary leave and when they do come back, do we know of anything in terms of, well, I guess confidentiality, can we go a little bit deeper into that, because it's kind of tough in a smaller business. Someone just asked, shouldn't we tell other employees who are infected so they can assess how much contact they had with an infected person? So just in that vein of confidentiality.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question.
In Sue's webinar that you'll be seeing soon, she and I had a great conversation about this, because yes, this is a good comment, a good question.
Yeah, and one of the things, there's 3 reasons that an employee needs to go into a self-quarantine, right? Number 1, they have been in contact with an individual directly. Number 2, somebody in their family or their household has been in contact with an individual who had been confirmed. And the third one is if an employee shows symptoms. If you have somebody in your workforce who has shown symptoms or has been in contact with somebody, they should be self-quarantined, and you should have that conversation with that individual to discuss with them who are other individuals that they may have been come into contact with within the workplace. And then you need to reach out to those individuals and share that. And in this kind of a situation, it is important that you do identify who the individual is. You can say that you may have come in contact with somebody. You can also share their name at that point, just like you would in an investigation, because it's critical to determining the impact of that situation. On a general side, though, when you're talking about, oh gosh, Sue has been out for 2 weeks because, you know, she's quarantining because she ran into somebody down the street at the grocery store, you don't want to share that information. You can allow that information to be shared by the employees, which they will all do. You don't have to worry. Employees are going to share this information.
They all talk. But Sue, I think it's also important to somehow mitigate the paranoia and fear that's going to now run rampant through the ranks, so to speak, through the employees. Because I mean, if I traveled, or you're talking about me and saying Dirk did this, and all of a sudden everybody's going to think terrible things and may want to go a different path and push me to leave the company, as opposed to go into quarantine and come back.
That's right. And, you know, this goes back to really keeping your employees safe. And one of the things and one of the policies I'm encouraging employers to put out is a notification and verification policy. And in that notification and verification, you want your employee to notify you if they're going to travel. And I have been coining it as traveling to a hotspot or traveling to a place where there's a breakout of more than, 5 cases, which we're starting to see everywhere. So I think making sure that employees know if they're traveling, they need to possibly come back and go into a self-quarantine. And you can put that into your policy, and you can put that it's paid, unpaid. You do not need to pay people. Well, I'm going to qualify that because under this House bill that just got passed, there may be a need.
We play by, yeah.
That, for the most part, you need to let your employees know that if they're traveling or somebody in their household is traveling, because that's where I'm hearing even more. They're more concerned because household members are traveling and they're in contact with others and bringing it in. And it is very concerning because people want to remain safe. So as you're thinking about that, just communicate to them, they need to inform you. And then when they come back, you need to meet with them and to make a determination if they can come into the workplace or if they're exhibiting signs, or for the safety of others, you want them to self-quarantine. And that's okay, because if you have, people who can work from home, but it becomes a greater issue if they cannot work from home.
Yeah, such as the housekeeping and maintenance staff. It's pretty tough to clean a house when you're sitting at home on your couch. So, yeah.
And, we're seeing some significant challenges in the industry already in Dare County out in North Carolina due to medical and limited hospitals and medical facilities. Just the other day, we saw in the news that even here out in Bend in the Sun River area, residents were very, very concerned about everybody coming for spring breaks and winter breaks and coming from Seattle, which is one of the major hot spots. So even the employees are not, take the employees, but also take the community. And now the community is getting involved. And so it's, even raising larger issues for some of these vacation rental managers in these areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of questions, especially when it comes to small businesses, how they're navigating some of the staffing needs, and a lot of the different variables that go into, everything from, reporting certain issues to temporary leaves and what that looks like for a small business. I kind of want to take just a quick pivot because I want to talk about some of the housekeeping stuff and then kind of flow back into staffing and kind of go back and forth, giving Dirk a little bit of a chance.
I don't know. I'm enjoying the conversation with Sue here. This is all critical stuff, because obviously on the back end, I'm Sue's worst nightmare. I'm 90% of her workload. So what the hey?
Yeah.
Well, and I will say one thing before we flip-flop to Dirk. This bill that was just passed, that was signed yesterday, what this is doing is this is providing protected leave and paid sick leave to employees for employers who have 500 or less employees. Where we're seeing the biggest area of concern is that there is a process, if people have 50 employees or less, that they can be exempt. What the bill has passed, and my understanding at this point, and again, I haven't read the full thing in detail, is that if an employee is going into self-quarantine or they're being quarantined for one of the 3 reasons that we discussed earlier, they are eligible to receive 2 weeks of paid sick leave.
Yeah.
Now, you can encourage everyone, and I encourage everyone to make sure everybody uses their earned paid time off first. So somebody can incur 2 weeks of paid sick leave. The other piece that came out of this is they are extending paid leave up to 3 months for individuals who have to remain at home due to taking care of children who are out of schools due to school closures. That is the only time you would be required to pay somebody in excess of 2 weeks, is if they are actually out due to the fact that they need to take care of their younger children. And for employers 50 employees or less, there is an exemption process that you can file for. I've looked out, there's nothing on the Department of Labor's website yet. What I have learned, though, at this point, the exemption that you would get would be in some sort of a tax credit. So as this information comes out, we'll keep updating the resource page on VRMA for you so that you have it at your disposal.
Yeah.
And is the payroll tax credit comment, is that in connection to, I think the bill is HR 6021. That's what that one of our participants just asked any more details about that. Is that what that's in relation
Yes,
to?
that's a part of it as well, payroll tax. And then there's also the stimulus where they're going to be distributing checks to Americans.
Right.
Fascinating time for sure.
All right, I want to talk about fun stuff. Let's talk about housekeeping.
So I have good news.
And the thing is, it's all interconnected.
So in my inbox this morning, I received a great email from my, for all of you that see me present, I have these stuffed microbes that I pass around, and my supplier that I buy those from has come out with a new microbe, COVID 2019. So I'm going to buy one so I can pass it around and share it with everybody. So there's the highlight of my day. Isn't that pretty sad? Anyway, I love it. I love it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think some of the things to kind of, before we kind of go into some scenarios of what to look out for, some steps, and a lot of the information, again, I want to just reiterate to the audience here, you can find in Dirk's webinar, pre-recorded webinar, where they talk more about the housekeeping needs. A lot of this information is there to help with, but for the purposes of this, of this town hall here, I want to focus on just sort of different products and needs within the home. So what is everyone doing about things like toilet paper and other products and home needs that they have?
I'm going down to my neighbor down the street, breaking in his back door. I'm going to take 6 of his cases. That's what I'm going to do. No.
Well, and if you live in Oregon, there's a florist here in town who's making toilet paper bouquets.
Yes.
For $75. You can get 6 rolls of toilet paper in a bouquet.
Oh my gosh.
Delivered locally.
Oh, I love
Wow.
it. I love it.
Creative.
I love it. Mateo's saying he's going to bail me out of jail for breaking and entering. I love it, Mateo. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. So my suggestion is this: get to know your local janitorial supply company and work with them, because they're ordering truckloads and truckloads of paper goods, and they're not selling to, well, they can sell to the general public. The general public is not going to the wheel call door and picking up those cases of toilet paper. Your janitorial supply place or person is going to be the one that's going to have your paper goods, your guest supplies, and the product to best take care of COVID 2019. As cleaning professionals, you have access to the janitorial supply industry. And so getting to know them and making those purchases through them will certainly go a long way in ensuring that your logistics and your inventory is not dwindled where you don't have any of those products.
Dirk, do you see anybody reaching out to like their local government agencies, especially getting into the school districts now that they're all closed? It would seem to me like there could be an abundance of toilet paper there.
So there could be. The issue is most of those they're a different type of paper, and they're a different type of dispensing system. So from a brainstorming standpoint, it's a great idea. The issue is going to be, if it's a coreless roll, how do I put it in a home style dispenser? And then the coreless roll is going to be like 3 or 4 times the depth of a standard toilet paper roll. So some things that, although, in a tight spot, and you need it, then that would certainly be the way to go. It's a really good suggestion. Paper towels you could certainly get from them because they have a trifold or a towel that you could use to clean with or put in properties if you need to, particularly if they're going to be closed for an extended period of time and they've got this inventory they want to unload. That's a really good idea.
One company I was speaking to in Hawaii, because this happened quite a couple of weeks ago, they were actually going into Costco daily because of the limit, but they were also encouraging all of their homeowners to go as well. So again, another tactic was getting everybody they could to help us that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You know, you've got lots of staff. You could certainly spread that around to do that if that's where you're purchasing it from.
Kind of speaking on the
thing in the chat box here, Mary Beth is saying that local restaurants are also selling the extra toilet paper at cost since they're closed. So that's another great spot. But again, the thing you want to be careful of is you want to make sure that it's the right toilet paper, because some of them have coreless, meaning there's not that that plastic or cardboard piece in the center. And so it's a totally different dispensing system. And then I do like what Leslie has listed here, where she always has a back stock or a safe stock, just in case there's a delay in the order, they still have the ability to proceed with. So, so I think those are all great suggestions.
I think its inventory is, go for it, Sue, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I had just seen a question pop up about if there's a time that housekeepers should be waiting before, or anyone waiting after a guest exits before they go into the home. And, you know, I recently was talking to someone earlier today, and they've actually scheduled out all of their homes so there's a full day in between, and they're waiting 24 hours before they're sending people in to clean. So I don't know, Dirk, what you're seeing or what you're hearing about, you know, the right timing to go in and clean after guests have departed.
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question, because that also ties into the question of how long does the virus live on a surface. And so the good thing about this particular virus is that it's not like the measles, where if you're in the room with somebody that if someone had the measles and you were in the room with them that had measles, you would get the measles. I mean, you actually have to touch the surface, and then, or the saliva of somebody talking or whatever actually has to get on you in some ways, where you touch your mouth, your nose, and your eyes and get it that way. I do know of one so a couple answers there. First answer is, how long does a virus live on the surface? I don't have a good answer yet, and I'm so sorry that I don't, because all of my research that I'm looking at says it can live from 4 hours up to 9 days. And that is not, I can't provide good information that way. So once I have good information, I promise to distribute that to let you know. That way you can have that information. As far as going in, because it's not airborne, you know, if the property owner wants to protect their staff in that way and wait a day, they certainly can do that. Otherwise, you know, as long as the cleaning professionals have the proper protective equipment, gloves, and they're using the right personal protective equipment based on the product that they're using, which you'll find in Section 8 on the safety data sheet, you're good to go. Another thing you could do is you could get a pressurized 2-liter sprayer or a quart sprayer. I've heard some people call it a bean sprayer. And you can actually put your sanitization product in that, because you're going to be spraying it on soft goods, and then you can spray that around and sanitize those particular items to do that. Because remember, from a disinfecting standpoint, yes?
Well, you were mentioning a lot of safety of your staff, and that actually dovetails into a question that I think might be really on the same vein of what you're talking about. Do you mind if I just ask that question?
Please do. That's what this is about.
Yeah, so someone was talking about how they've combed through both the OSHA and CDC websites, and yet some of the housekeepers are refusing to wear face masks, even though we are providing them. So even though they're providing that safety and that's there's some refusal. So is there any guidance in that area? And as a follow-up, as much as there are general guidance on PPEs, they cannot find PPEs per specific operation. So do you know of any websites or resources to kind of help direct them?
All right, so any personal protective equipment that a cleaner is going to need is going to be driven by the products they're using. So that's why I say if they're using a specific disinfecting product, then they need to have the safety data sheet, and they need to go to Section 8 to see what gloves, glasses, splash goggles, chemical resistant pervious gloves, anything of that nature that they would need to be using as they use that product. As far as the masks go, if a housekeeper chooses not to, or a cleaning professional chooses not to use the personal protective equipment that's provided, that is their choice. At the same time, from a mask standpoint, the masks really do not stop the COVID 2019, because if I recall correctly, the mask would have to be an N95, which then means it has to be custom fit and all these things with that. If it's just a normal dust mask or just even a surgical mask, the particulate is so small it's passing through. And really, you think about how it's passed. It's if I touch a surface and then I touch my eye, touch my nose, touch my mouth, that's how it's coming in contact. So that's why the gloves and the washing of hands are really, really important. Because as you start to look at COVID 2019, it's a coronavirus, and it's important to know that the common cold is also a coronavirus, and the influenza is a coronavirus. And so this COVID 2019 is very similar to those other coronaviruses that are just naturally, we always talk about flu season or cold season. And so that's why the washing of the hands is so effective, because it falls into that same category. Is that so that's where that's how I would approach that. And again, you want to make sure from a cleaning standpoint, you want to make sure that you have the EPA, and I provided this link to Ryan, has a list. Last time I looked at it, there were 274 entries on that list of products that have been tested against COVID 2019 and will kill it. So remember, we disinfect hard surfaces. So that means that it has to dwell or sit on the surface for a specific amount of time in order for it to kill the microbes. On the soft goods, I'm sanitizing, which means I'm reducing the likelihood of getting sick.
Mm-hmm. To kind of drill deeper into that, I know there's a lot of questions on talking about different surfaces and how they can transfer the virus. There are some people that are asking about, does the virus go through softer surfaces like sheets, protective mattresses, covers, things like that? And then someone kind of added on there, is it that they read that, whether this is a myth or this is also reasonable, that they read to not shake the linens out because that would make the virus go airborne? Do you think that's reasonable precaution? Are there other precautions that people can take?
Yeah, so
think about when they're doing their.
So let's talk to Robin's comments about the sheets. You think about so think about yourself. You're lying in bed, it's hay fever season, and so you have to sneeze. So if you roll over and sneeze into your pillow, you think about when you sneeze, how far that sneeze and all of that saliva and stuff is going to carry through the air. I mean, it's a pretty good force and a pretty good distance that it will travel. And so if you roll over and sneeze into your pillow, that force is going to pass it through the pillowcase to the pillow protector, and it may even go through the pillow protector into the pillow. So you may have to wash, to wash those items. So is there a possibility? Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm talking about this process of where you take a good sanitization product and you're spraying all your soft goods. So you're simply reducing the number and taking care of that. And in the webinar that I did, I actually showed a slide deck of one of those pressurized sprayers. So again, you want to reach out to your local janitorial supply company, make sure you're getting the correct dilution ratio so you can go around and spray that. And then as far as shaking the linens, so remember it has to be passed through saliva. And if you were to shake the sheets, if there was some wet saliva or some boogers or something like that on the sheet that could be airborne through that way. Oh, come on, people. Come on. We're talking housekeeping stuff here. This is fair game.
Nitty-gritty.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so, you're going to grab the sheets, you're going to put them in the bag, and you're going to take them back. And so that means back in your laundry, then you need to make sure that you have, the proper personal protective equipment of gloves and so forth for your laundry staff to use in your commercial laundry setting. Really good questions, really good questions. And so, so I also think it's real important to understand, because how I described how this coronavirus, or the COVID 2019 is very similar to the common flu and to the influenza. You know, do we need to be careful? Yes. Do we need to be respectful? Yes. And so do we need to make sure we're taking care of our staff and providing all the personal protective equipment that we can? Yes. Is it communicable? Yes. At the same time, we have to understand it's not the Black Plague and it's not the measles. And so we need to be, you know, have those frame of references.
So Dirk, I wanted to kind of ask a little bit of a follow-up there. As you and I know, and we've had many conversations with many people over the years about employees and housekeepers as employees and housekeepers as independent contractors. What are you seeing as some of the best practices today for companies who are working with independent contractors as far as maintaining these standards?
If I had a virtual candy bar, I would pass it your way. That is a great question. So again, so it goes back to the premise of how do I work with my cleaning contractors? I have my standard property appearance. And so that's what I'm going to clean towards. So now we're going to start talking about all of the high touch areas that I mentioned in my webinar, you know, the light switch plates, the remote controls, the lamp thumb turns, all of those things we're going to be talking about. So as a business owner to a business owner, I'm going to sit down with that business owner and say, hey, these are different times. These are times where we have to make sure that we are sanitizing and disinfecting to the best of our ability. Let's talk about the products you're using. Let's make sure that you have the best products that you can get. And if I need to use my leverage, you know, or my influence at a local janitorial supply company to help you get in that door and to do those things that way and to get those products, then that's what I will do for you. So again, right, it's a business, we're in this together. This is a relationship. And so sitting down with them and talking to them, business owner to business owner, I think is the best way to go. Because then it educates them and it educates you on what their challenges are.
Yes.
And the other thing to consider too is it's going to take more time to clean. You know, it's just not as simple as the standard clean times, because I mean, it's a variation of a deep clean almost. Well, not almost, it is, based on the amount of time and surfaces and all sorts of things that go with that. So you're going to have to make sure that you allocate, as you're forecasting the workload, that you have that time set aside that way.
Mm-hmm. Great.
One question that kind of, I guess, talks a little bit more on some like new staffing requirements as well as cleaning. This is kind of a little bit more of a combined question. People are just wanting to limit their maintenance services to emergency only. So I guess to get both of your perspectives on, as we're talking about using different products, as we're talking about making sure that protocol and processes are right for the staff themselves. If someone wants to go to an emergency only maintenance service, do we know of any other companies that have done this or are talking about this? Is there any considering, you know, doing this? Any recommendations on how to best make sure that staff is you know, protected, as well as things are safe and on the property? Dirk, let's start with you.
Can I go, please? Can I?
Yeah, sure, Dirk. Yeah,
thanks.
Sure, Dirk.
I love it. So, a couple of things as we talk about this. Number one, so we're going to we're going to connect with somebody in a house. So that means I'm not going to shake their hands. That means I'm going to do showmanship, right? As I enter the property, I'm going to say, can I wash my hands immediately so I can do all that stuff I need to do? The other thing to consider too is we have been entrusted to manage the asset. And this asset is going to take care, whether it's occupied or not occupied. And so that's part A. The part B to this is, what's the business decision or business reasoning why you want to go to this emergency only? Is it because you're trying to trying to operate within the new bounds that the law that Sue is talking about is? Does that mean I'm reducing my workforce, I'm reducing my hours, so then I can do this hybrid of payroll and this hybrid of unemployment? That way I can make sure my cash lasts longer. You know, I mean, all these things that go into that. So what's really the business reason behind what I'm doing this? And then based on that business reason, then I can make adjustments to what's taking place. The asset still has to be taken care of, and we still need to maintain our relationship with the owner of that asset. and we still need to maintain our relationship with our staff, because the last thing we want to do is our staff to go somewhere else. So
Right.
those are my initial thoughts.
And you know what I'm starting to see, and this kind of takes me back to my military days, but when you are in a crisis situation and there's frontline people who are kind of put out there, maybe the closest, or when you think about your staff going into the homes when the guests are there or going in after they've departed and there still could be, germs there, in order to kind of retain this workforce, we talked about remote working. We talked about maybe some workplace reductions. But the other thing you may have to start thinking about is compensation. Are you going to need to address your compensation to continue to incent people to want to be on the front line and to be going into these homes? So I think that's certainly something for businesses to consider, especially as they're starting to see resources. Well, we have limited resources to begin with, and now as you start to see these resources continuing to dwindle, what kinds of things can you do to help make employees feel more comfortable or feel, that they're okay with being on the front line for this?
Yeah, and it's curious, Sue, because based on that, it's going to take more time to clean and to do all these things. So I think it's appropriate to charge more, and I think it's appropriate to pay the cleaning staff more based on time. Because if you're paying in a piece rate environment or being paid by the property, then you have to be able to compensate that in some way, shape, or form. Otherwise, you're just expecting Dirk as a cleaner to come in and do more work for the same amount of pay. So that means I get a pay reduction. Yeah. Which means I'm not going to be very excited and very happy about. So, we want to make sure that we're able to do that. And so one of the videos that VRHP will be producing today is how to go through and do that on the piece rate spreadsheet that we provide on how to calculate what that time would be. And so again, we've got all these resources that are coming available to you as we try to get the information you need so you can make the best decisions that you can as business owners and as employees and as stewards of the responsibilities that you have.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just keep talking here because I see Cindy's question about eliminating mid-cleans. So Cindy's question is this: should we eliminate our mid-cleanings that are including during full week stays to help keep the staff safe? Well, so the underlying assumption is you're assuming the people there have COVID 2019. Now, I agree that you're contagious long before the symptoms arise. If you feel that that's what you need to do to help your staff and to do that from a business standpoint, then by all means, you should certainly do that. And then you could take that cost that you would pay the cleaner on the mid clean, throw it to the departure clean, because now the departure clean, based on what your staff is used to, is going to be a little more challenging, because that's the advantage of the mid clean, is to come in and refresh things and get things done. And to your guests who are expecting clean sheets and clean towels, you may need to do a drop off service where you drop off the set and pick up the dirty in a bag already. So, I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do that. As you start to think about that, though, we need to be communicating. We need to be telling our story. If you're going to do this with guests, then they need to know in advance. Do a video. I mean, the technology we have, even to have this town hall meeting, to be still socially connected, even though we're not in the same room, you can do that with your guests. And telling your story is so important in letting your guests, your owners, and your staff know what's taking place. To you executive housekeepers that are on, or housekeeping managers that are on this call or in this town hall meeting, I would advocate that you send an email out once a week of what you're doing. Take a picture of you meeting with the local janitorial supply company. Take a picture of you talking, take a video of you talking and training your staff about the disinfecting product that you're using. That way the people in the company know what you're doing. If they don't know, they're just going to assume and make their own judgments. This is your story. Tell your story. And then tell your story to your guests and owners. So important.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
The
I
other
got on my
piece
high
too
horse.
that I think employers need to be cognizant of is when you think about the employer rights and employee rights,
Yes.
there's more coming up about this is protected under workers' compensation. And while it's highly unlikely somebody could prove that they came in direct contact with somebody in the workforce who had it or one of these guests, it's another consideration, especially if you are having people interact in, you know, a social environment where there may be a larger gathering and, you know, there may be, you know, less space around. So again, thinking about your employees, and when you come up with this information, if somebody does come to you and they've been in contact with somebody, that you address it really quickly. And I'm hearing from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing from reading things, it's probably going to be a far shot that somebody could, you know, get the claim, but it's not unreasonable to think that it could happen.
Right. So this ties back to this whole minefield or labyrinth that we're trying to navigate, because A, information is changing, and B, rules are changing. And so that's why if we communicate, and it's totally okay to tell an employee, I don't know, I will find out.
Right.
It's totally acceptable to do this. It's totally acceptable to tell an owner that or a guest that, and then find out, and then report back. I haven't found an answer yet, and all those things that go with that.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left for this town hall.
What? We just got started.
Yeah, I know.
10
Time
minutes.
flew, right? We're having fun. 13 minutes, 10 minutes. So, you know, one question that just came up that I think is probably pretty important on both sides is, you know, we are talking about housekeeping staff, maintenance staff. We're talking about our own internal employees. Two questions kind of came out. One talked a little bit more about contractors who I'm not sure if there was too much information at this town hall about contractors, but is there any sort of messaging or recommendations when it comes to as contractors are dealing with some of the reduced workforce, and what are some of the conversations around that, or is that still something that's evolving?
You know, it's interesting because there's a lot of information coming out, and I think the one thing that I would encourage, you know, property managers to do who are working with contractors and contracting companies is to talk to them and find out what kind of processes they have in place for the people that they're employing and they're using to clean your properties. Because the key is you want to make sure everybody has the same information and is really informed about what to be looking for. And you want to make sure that your contractors have this information. So if they see somebody who may have signs or somebody's been in contact with someone, they're not bringing those individuals into your properties and continuing to propagate this spread.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Again, right. Business owner to business owner. What are we doing? Yeah. We're in this together. How are we going to do this? The last thing we need is to be operating in silos. Yeah. And I would even advocate, you know, business owner to business owner of hotels and vacation rental companies, bed and breakfasts in your community. You should be connecting with and talking with and have a unified voice. Because there was a comment about, you know, help and where can I get help? You know, I did an interview with oh dear, what's her name? I did an interview with, just a moment, I can tell you.
Well, there's lots of kids out of school.
Right? Put them to work.
Yeah.
There it is. With the development, county development. And so you can reach out to those individuals. They're responsible for helping the business in their county, as well new business and established business. And so they're going to have access to SBA loans. They're going to have access to all sorts of things for you as a business owner to reach out and resources to help you, you know, go through this. And so, yeah, reach out to your Chamber of Commerce and find out who the executive director of county development is, or business development is in your county, and then ask them questions and see what they have available to you. Every county's different, every state's different. And I would also advocate, you know, if you're joining us from outside the United States, you know, there's a counterpart that someone's responsible for building business in your region. Find out who they are and see what resources they have. Now is the time to ask, you know, especially since the law has changed where the unemployment doesn't ding you. dang, let's really start to ask questions, because questions that were taboo before now may be totally in line. And if you're showing
Right.
unity and saying, hey, everybody around me is a small business owner and we need help here, then that only further adds weight to what you're trying to accomplish. So now's the time to create alliances in your community, in your city, wherever that may be, to go forward. Anyway, so
absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I think we got a chance to go through a lot of different questions today. We got a chance to talk about a lot of different topics on both sides of your perspectives and expertise. I think as we kind of want to end things off here, is there any sort of final notes or final thoughts about you know, meetings like these, or as things are developing, or just sort of a general synthesis of what you want to leave the audience off with this time around, and to you know, maybe some sort of final thoughts, to start with Dirk or Sue?
Sure. I mean, I think that the thing I would really encourage you to think about right now is how you can make your workplace safe for your employees, and also to think about their emotional states right now. I mean, it's a very high time, and for those employees who are working remotely, you may have to have a little more flexibility. You may not be able to say you have to work in a room and you can't be watching your kids, because that probably isn't going to happen because all the kids are home. So, and understanding that people may not be working their regular 8 to 5 schedule or 9 to 6. Start thinking about how you can stagger schedules so that you can get some better coverage. And then also, for those of you who have employee assistance programs, you know, really getting information out to people about things that they can do. And employee assistance providers actually can provide counselors. They can provide all kinds of resources to help your employees. If you don't have those kinds of programs, you can certainly work with your benefit partners. You can work with your workers' comp insurance partners. They all have resources available that you can utilize to help communicate with your employees and make sure that things are going. I would just say, as I've looked at this and as I've talked to a lot of people, you know, work isn't going to be the same for this period of time, and to just understand how you can keep track of performance and productivity, have very common and regular conversations, and, you know, have that little bit of flexibility to understand that people are dealing with this on a personal level, especially if they're at home in a quarantine situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sue. It's all about communication. You know, we have the work to get the properties cleaned. We have the work to take care of the asset. We have all of this that needs to be done. At the same time, it still has to be done with our human hands. And so we want to make sure that we're communicating with them. We're communicating to our staff as to what's taking place, what we're doing, and building those relationships, and then communicating that information to our guests and owners as we go forward. I totally agree.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, we are reaching to that next hour. I do want to thank both of you, Sue and Dirk, for all of your help. Even in the comments, I'm also getting a lot of thank yous from people. So first of all, thank you so much for all your guidance and insight, especially as things are evolving and changing, sometimes by the hour, sometimes by the day. So thank you for helping us keep as current and concurrent as possible on all the information. For more information about specifics on housekeeping, or on in terms of staffing and HR policies, there are those pre-recorded webinars that will be, by the end of the week, up and running onto the VRMA resource page. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to investing in these types of town halls, these types of webinars, things that this type of education is paramount and crucial, especially at times like these. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here just to see if you know, to get your take on this town hall. If we want to do, you know, whatever else we would want to do. If you liked what you heard today, if you thought that it was helpful, please go ahead. If you'd like to answer the poll before you leave, that'd be fantastic. Dirk, Sue, thank you so much again for your time, and we hope to continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.